Where did the Enneagram come from?
Yeah, the Enneagram's actually a little more, the history of it's a little more complicated, because it's not as obvious what it is. And it's presented in the church as a personality, tool, a personality assessment tool. And so it looks, for most people, it looks kind of innocent or neutral anyway. And maybe astrology, they would be like, oh no, I'm not going to have anything to do with that. I know that's wrong. But the Enneagram, oh, hey, it's just a psychological tool, But actually, it did not start that way at all. First of all, it's not ancient. Unfortunately, all the Enneagram books say it's ancient, or they say that its origins are so murky, we don't really know when it started. But, maybe Pythagoras started it, it was in ancient Greece, or maybe so and so, and they throw out all this stuff as possibilities, none of which are true. So there's this idea that it's ancient, and there's an idea that it has Christian origins, which has also been promoted, sadly, by a lot of Christian books and a lot of Christian Enneagram teachers. This was something I was constantly, when it started really getting into the church and getting hold, like around 2018, and I was constantly posting, the Enneagram isn't ancient. The Enneagram has no Christian. I have an article on my website. The Enneagram has no Christian origins. That's the article is on that. So I was just kind of standing. I felt like I was standing on a rooftop and screaming. Sometimes I was screaming into the wind, like, is anybody hearing me? So I was extremely passionate about getting this out there because I just couldn't stand these falsehoods.
Right.
Just there's so much falsehood going on. So it really started as a shape that we know it today in 1916, which is only 106 years ago.
Right, yeah. Okay.
And it started by a man named George Gurdjieff. He was he was like a mystic and a spiritual teacher. He claimed to explore all these religions, and he claimed to travel around and talk to different religious leaders. And he had his own following, people who followed his teachings. He was teaching this very esoteric stuff, kind of like what you would hear today in the New Age, that you don't really know who you are. You don't really know reality. You're asleep. You have to wake. You have to have an awakening. He called it awakening to the new man. And so he had a program for that. And the Enneagram for him was a picture of the universe. And he said, this is the universe. You can fit all the laws of the universe into the Enneagram. It explains in other words, the Enneagram explains everything. Now, this is sort of an occult idea, too, that you get a diagram or something, and this is going to explain reality. Because, you can start playing around with it and reading all kinds of things into it, which is what he did. And he had the law of 3 and the law of 7 that he said were illustrated mathematically by the Enneagram. And there are mathematical components to it. The Enneagram is, by the way, I should say, is a 9-pointed diagram, geometric figure. So when you have 9 points, you have 9 is sort of like a quote unquote magic number in numbers because of the way math works. And so you can have something called casting out nines, like 8 and 1 is 9, 7 and 2 is 9. And if you add things up to 9, well, I'm not going to get into that anyway. There's all kinds of things you can do with it mathematically. So he was doing stuff like that, and he had a pupil named Ouspensky. And Ouspensky, Gurdjieff didn't write anything about the Enneagram, but Ouspensky did. And Ouspensky wrote about Gurdjieff's ideas, and Ouspensky also had followers. And so there were people following Gurdjieff's teachings and Ouspensky's teachings who knew about the Enneagram, but it wasn't about a personality thing. It wasn't a personality thing. It was this cosmic tool, for awakening to the new self or whatever. And so that's where it was. And they both died in the late 1940s. Then along comes Oscar Ichazo in the 1960s. He's an occult teacher. and he has a school in Chile, and in Arica, Chile, and he starts teaching the Enneagram. There are different stories about how he came across it. There's quite a few stories about how he came across it. Some of them are very mystical, like he had an angel reveal it to him in this mystical thing. I did a Facebook post on that. I read a story that he ran into some followers of Gurdjieff in a cafe where he was working, and that's how he found out about it. And then you have the ideas I have heard from more scholarly people that he probably read a book by Ouspensky. He probably read one of Ouspensky's books, which were available at the time. And since he was interested in occult kind of ideas, right, it's not too surprising because I think he studied the Kabbalah as well. So he studied a lot of different things like that, and that may be how he found out about it. And he started teaching it at his school, but he kind of put his own, stamp on it.
Yeah.
And he said these 9 points were ego fixations. And an ego fixation is who you identify as, but it's not the real you. You're identifying as that person because that is how you were conditioned to think. And you were raised to believe certain things. You had certain experiences in your life. And all of these conditioned you to believe certain things. And then that made you who you think you are. But that's your false self. That's not your true self. And so you have to deconstruct this false self and find the true essence. He believed that everybody had a perfect, pure essence. And we all have this pure essence self, kind of. I don't know if he used the word divine, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did. The idea would be that it's divine. And you have this pure self, and that's your true self. And so that you go through the ego fixation to help you discover that and realize all these falsehoods about yourself. So that's how he taught it. And he had a pupil named Claudio Naranjo. Claudio Naranjo was a Chilean psychiatrist. And in case anybody thinks that gives the Enneagram some validity, let me tell you what his specialty was. Naranjo's specialty was studying the effects of mind-altering drugs on the brain. So, yeah. Yes, that was his thing. That was his thing. So, and he partook. He took the drugs himself for spiritual experiences. He was very into this. He was into shamanism. He did a long interview that I watched. It must have been about 2 hours long with a German filmmaker. A German guy interviewed him. And the whole thing was about Naranjo's absolute love for shamanism and how he feels that's the path he's the closest to. And shamanism is really sorcery. It involves the use of mind-altering drugs, usually for spirit contact or contact with the dead. The shaman is the mediator between the tribe and the spirits. And so the shaman he's the mediator and the healer. So they did healing, or they do healing. There's still shamans around. They do healing. And a lot of it is done through supposedly this contact with the spirit world. It could be they could be saying it's the ancestors. They could be saying it's some other kind of spirits. Could be animal spirits. All kinds of things. But the bottom line is it's the spirit world. And the shaman's the mediator and brings the messages and the healing to the people. So that's what a shaman is. And this is what Naranjo was fascinated with. And so that's where his interest was. So, and he believed in spirit contact, as did Ichazo. Ichazo did spirit contact as well. And Naranjo called his spirits higher authorities. And he believed, in getting messages from them and contacting them. So this is where Naranjo was spiritually and mentally. He was into this whole spirit contact thing. He basically was kind of a new ager. And he was teaching the Enneagram that the 9 points there, which came to be called types, the 9 types, also represented this self that you had to uncover. you had to dismantle to discover this true essence. Very similar to Ichazo. He probably added more layers, psychological layers to it. And it was introduced to the New Age via Helen Palmer, a psychic. And it got into the New Age big, big time. She wrote on it. A lot of New Agers picked up on it, started teaching it and using it. It also got into the Catholic Church through a Jesuit priest named Bob Oakes. And he learned it from Naranjo, and he took it to a seminary in Chicago. And so some Catholic priests learned it. It was never endorsed or promoted by the Catholic Church. And in fact, the first warnings against the Enneagram came from Roman Catholics who had encountered it, including one who had been teaching it. A Jesuit named Mitch Pacwa learned the Enneagram when Bob Oakes took it to Loyola, and he started teaching it and using it. And then he started investigating it and discovered, wait a minute, this isn't a good thing. This doesn't have any origins in psychology. It doesn't have any Christian basis or anything. He just, so he started denouncing it. Now, the reason I'm bringing up the Catholic angle is because there are still Catholics out there who use it, and there's some books by Catholics on the Enneagram. But also, I want to bring it up because one of the people who learned it, apparently at Loyola or in connection with that, was Richard Rohr. And he's somebody I have to talk about in a minute because he plays a major role in this Enneagram business in the church. So the Enneagram, that was how it took shape. Now, Claudio Naranjo admitted in a video that he got most of the information on the 9 types from automatic writing. And automatic writing is a form of spirit contact. So he claims that is where a lot of the information came from, from his higher authorities. And he apparently thinks that's a really cool thing. And you can tell in the video he thinks that. And the people that are sitting there thinking it's a New Age program. So, they're all on the same page with it. This video is still on YouTube, and I've posted it many times. I have links to it, I think, in some of my Enneagram articles.